Have you ever felt like your life didn't begin here? That you already knew some people before you met them? There are truths we weren't meant to discover until now. What you are about to hear will forever change the way you view death, rebirth, and your destiny. Prepare your mind to remember what your soul has never forgotten. There is a manuscript hidden for centuries, concealed by institutions fearful of its contents, because it dissolves terror and with it subjugation. It does not describe heaven or hell, rewards or punishments, but the most subversive of truths, the inalienable freedom of the soul. It is the story of those who have endured countless deaths until they no longer fear them, and of those who have assumed 1,000 forms, understanding the reason for their return. After centuries spent in the vortex of samsara, the original memory re-emerged, and with it the sense of the present incarnation, with the chosen family, the desired tests, the necessary body. Nothing was a coincidence. Every encounter, sudden affinity, or excruciating pain stems from a pact prior to corporeal existence. In the silence that separates the last breath from the first cry, companions, teachers, and lessons are decided, even those who will wound most deeply, so that healing can take place beyond the boundaries of time. Destiny is not a chain, but an architecture built by our own eternal essence, which does not undergo samsara, but rather passes through it as an evolutionary theater. Death does not conclude, but opens the next door because the soul incessantly chooses what to know, love, or heal again. This is the forbidden book of samsara, the narrative of the soul's return to complete what remains unfinished and finally reunite with its origins. The heart tunes to an ancient rhythm and an invisible threshold opens. The journey begins. If you want this revelation to reach as many souls as possible, leave a hype on this video right now. It will be the signal that you are ready to receive what was hidden from you. I remember my first death, which occurred long before the breath of life left the flesh. It was the dissolution of every mask when I discovered that I was not my earthly role, but the principle that animated it. I was a child in a city of pale stone, perched among mountains that touched the sky, and I believed that daily routine, steeped in the aromas of bread and spices, would last forever. One evening, however, a subtle weariness invaded my bones like a cold fog, announcing with serene certainty the final sunset. My parents' loving gestures couldn't stop my departure, and I stopped resisting with a new calm. The space became as clear as water, and while my body lay still, I rose toward a directionless elsewhere. I saw my mother cry on her now cold face, and I felt her love like an ancient river flowing through many shared lives. I wanted to hold her and reassure her, but a gentle current drew me back to the luminous source to which we all belong. In that formless light, I understood the eternity of the essence I had always embodied in changing forms. Death revealed itself as a reiterated threshold through which the soul is reborn each time a new learning calls it back into the cycle. The great wheel of samsara appeared, majestic and infinite, where different existences intertwine, guided by the primal impulse of inner expansion. No judgment or punishment accompanied it, only love, recognizing itself in its multiple expressions. A deep voice, coinciding with the core of my identity, pronounced my chosen destiny. You will return, not out of duty, but out of desire. Each return heralded a further act of love toward what still awaited understanding or healing. I opened my eyes in a new body, welcomed by a different beginning, as the wheel resumed its slow rotation. I heard the flow of a distant river and the tolling of a ritual bell, heralding another possibility of recognition. In that existence, I was a warrior of the northern expanses, forged by the wind and silence of the infinite steppes. I was ignorant of doctrines and temples, but I knew the ancestral voice of the soul that sometimes whispered memories not mine. One day, a caravan arrived laden with goods, and among the travelers I glimpsed a young woman with a light step and a gaze that seemed to hold an ancient light. The moment our eyes met, the world froze, recognizing a connection beyond time. It wasn't earthly longing, but a deep memory, like the longing for water felt by someone who has long been thirsty. She felt the same thrill, as if our souls had found their way back to each other after being separated by ages of confusion. I returned to my bed that night, unable to find rest, as a subtle ache resurfaced where broken love leaves invisible scars. I asked fate to show me the truth, and I was granted a glimpse of the past. I saw an ancient temple and two young people swearing loyalty to the moon, the same gazes they had now recognized on the steps. A tragic event separated them, and the promise remained unfulfilled, calling for a new meeting to be fulfilled. I understood then that no union happens by chance. Every meaningful encounter is a call to resolve what has remained unresolved. However, frightened by the language of the heart that I no longer knew how to express, I let the caravan drift away without a word. I lived my entire life unable to forget that light, wondering what might have been born if I had followed the impulse of my soul. When death descended again, the truth welcomed me in the timeless light. True love cannot be lost, it awaits. The souls who have sought each other will continue to meet until they learn to stay, overcoming fear and silence. Generation after generation, they intertwine destinies until the primordial promise finds the fulfillment it deserves. This is the vow of samsara. No sincere affection fades, it only changes form, because every heart recognizes what eternity has entrusted to it. With this certainty, I was reborn again, wandering with buried memories and the desire to rediscover what was never lost. In his next life, fear was his first companion, a senseless tremor that had oppressed his chest since childhood. The nights were haunted by a recurring dream. In a damp darkness, a man with a sorrowful face but devoid of hatred waited. That torment followed me into adulthood until one day, in the crowd at the market, I encountered the same gaze that haunted my nightmares. He was an ordinary craftsman, and yet his presence stirred within me an ancient debt I couldn't name. In the next dream, the contours became clear. I had been a soldier and he a prisoner, and at my hands he had suffered injustices that scarred his spirit more than his flesh. Remorse resurfaced with the violence of a truth silenced for centuries. I sought him out and with a hesitant gesture offered my help, confessing a guilt my mind couldn't recall, but my soul had never stopped bearing. He, astonished, recognized in turn dreamlike images haunting him. The past had opened up for both of us. In our mutual recognition, the invisible chain that bound us broke, granting peace to the two shores of our intertwined destiny. Karma, understood not as punishment but as living memory, had brought us back to each other to allow healing to take place. Thus I learned that every spiritual debt is not a curse, but rather an invitation to become what we once were not. The wheel turns not to condemn us, but to offer us the opportunity to restore, redeem, understand, and finally liberate ourselves. Reborn again, I found myself surrounded by wealth, health, and privilege that could have led me to believe that life was rightfully mine. Unaware of the humility necessary for growth, I considered other means of fulfillment. In my house, there was a stooped, silent elder whose discreet presence was as indifferent to me as an object. One day, he spilled wine on my precious robe, and I reacted with ferocious arrogance, humiliating him in front of the other servants without feeling remorse. That night, I dreamed the hidden truth. I saw the same man in the guise of a sovereign, while I, prostrate at his feet, begged for mercy for a sin committed in a distant past. He forgave me with a look filled with sad knowledge, announcing a lesson yet unlearned. I then began to observe his calm demeanor, the composed dignity with which he endured adversity, the clear peace that no wealth could have bought. In his simple gestures resided a wisdom that was inaccessible to me. When my family fell into ruin and every luxury was mercilessly stripped away, he stood by me, asking nothing in return. With unyielding patience, he taught my soul what privilege had kept me from knowing that only those who shed pride can be reborn to truth. He revealed himself as a powerful teacher, even in his humble guise, impressing upon me that suffering comes not to destroy us, but to reveal what we still ignore about ourselves. Pain, stripped of its apparent injustice, reveals itself as a chisel that smooths the being. At the end of that life, a letter left by my mentor revealed the pact that had united us for ages. We had chosen each other to temper one another. The people who hurt deeply are often those whom the soul has summoned to smooth the rough edges of our character and lead us to spiritual maturity. Those who present themselves as obstacles are often the invisible hand of our own evolutionary project. Every difficult relationship is a gateway to liberation, provided we have the courage to decipher its hidden lesson. Reborn again in a frail body immersed in poverty, I remained in the arms of a desperate mother, almost overcome by shame. In that life, the choice to incarnate was not born of karmic constraint, but from the desire to be a loving support for another soul in need. I consciously embraced vulnerability as a way to summon in my mother the strength needed to rediscover her dignity and courage. Her every sacrifice and my every limitation proved to be subtle instruments of mutual healing, confirming that birth is always an act of alliance. One night, in a dream, I recalled the decision that preceded my descent into matter, and I wept as I recognized the mission I had freely embraced. No existence takes shape without a reason, for the soul chooses circumstances and connections to broaden its light. The difficult days shaped my young consciousness, and the final loss of my mother sealed the meaning of our understanding. Souls who agree to support each other do so beyond the confines of memory, in the certainty that every sacrifice is the seed of awakening. I then understood that life is not chosen for convenience, but for the sake of inner expansion. Many choose steep paths so that virtue, tempered by experience, can germinate more firmly. In my next incarnation, I was born in a village nestled among ancient forests, where my mother practiced the art of healing with hands steeped in ancient wisdom. She knew how to soothe not only the ailments of the body, but also the hidden pains of the soul, intuiting what silence tries to hide. On the threshold of death, she revealed to me that her healing capacity had blossomed from the trauma of losing a child, a pain so profound that it opened her eyes to the torments of others as a mirror of her own. Understanding that wound had granted her the gift of transforming suffering into active compassion. When I too was shattered by the sudden death of my companion, I fell into a lightless abyss, believing that I could no longer be of help to anyone. But a desperate mother asked for my intervention anyway, and by caring for her little girl, I discovered I was capable of getting back on my feet because shared pain becomes medicine. I intuited that those who have experienced suffering possess the most authentic knowledge to guide those still mired in it. The most effective healers are not those who ignore the cracks, but those who have transformed them into gateways to a broader consciousness. At the end of that life, I recognized that no authentic wound is sterile, because every laceration contains a seed of rebirth ready to become a gift for others. Unprocessed pain remains a burden, while transformed pain becomes knowledge that lights the way. When I found myself once again in the silence between one existence and the next, I became aware of all the lives I had already lived, as concentric circles of a single internal tree. Each inhabited body was a growth ring, living proof of the continuity of being beyond every metamorphosis. Luminous presences gathered around me, those who had shared many stories with me, mothers, friends, lovers, adversaries, all cooperating in my evolution. Soul and relationships are never lost, they simply disguise themselves to play new roles in the same cosmic drama. My ancient guide reminded me that there is no imposed fate, since every lifeline is a conscious choice of the consciousness that desires to experience and progress. The wheel of samsara is not a prison, but an infinite canvas on which we freely paint the picture of being. I was shown many possible trajectories, future existences like branches of a still expanding cosmic tree. Every direction was an opportunity for love, knowledge, or service, and nothing was predetermined. I was the architect of the range of my possibilities. I chose to return, not out of obligation, but out of a desire to continue the adventure of learning, carrying within me a spark of memory that could guide me through the most difficult trials. Even in earthly oblivion, the inner voice would continue to whisper the truth of my origins. Before the new birth, I met the souls with whom I would intertwine my existence, making invisible agreements destined to emerge in the form of love or conflict. Every fundamental bond is born in the pre-world as a mutual pact of growth. Among those presences, a familiar light proposed itself as my son, helping me overcome ancient rigidities, teaching me that love means knowing how to let go. Another soul, burdened with shadows, chose to be the traitor who would force me to recognize my deepest intuition. Each agreed upon role had a higher purpose, since even those who harm act with the other's consent in an evolutionary dance that transcends judgment and victimhood. There are no real victims in samsara, there are allies willing to play difficult roles to accelerate our liberation. When conscious memory erases such pacts, the heart nevertheless recognizes kindred or antagonistic souls with unerring precision. The most impactful encounters are never casual, but sacred encounters in which destiny is revealed through the gaze of another. Finally, I understood that all of life is a cooperation orchestrated by the soul, which through relationships teaches us forgiveness, balance, and creative responsibility. Free will lies in how we respond to these contracts. We can remain prisoners of pain or convert it into liberation. During a long life at the end of my days, I found myself in a suspended passage, where time no longer advanced as a line but unfolded as a perfect circle. In that intermediate space, every experience, past or potential, coexisted in the single eternal present. I saw all my incarnations simultaneously, like different points of a single mandala observed from above. The dying child, the hesitant warrior, the guilty merchant, the compassionate son, the healer, the disciple of silence, and many other selves in action. Each version of my identity contributed to a single consciousness that encompassed and transcended them. I understood that linearity is a functional illusion. The soul passes through events one at a time to savor their consequences, but in reality, everything happens simultaneously. Each choice creates ramifications of existence, whose resonances influence each other beyond the ages. When a karmic knot dissolves in one lifeline, the wave of healing reaches the others, both retroactively and forward. Nothing is fixed. The past itself is shaped when we choose forgiveness or love as a new response to the same issues. I discovered that free will is not an illusion, but the only reality. What we call destiny is merely the sum of the choices made by the soul in the limitless field of possibilities. Time, however, is the instrument with which consciousness makes itself visible in multiple acts. With this understanding, I was no longer a prisoner of samsara, but its explorer, free to decide when to remain and when to ascend beyond the game. Each existence became a flower in the garden of eternity, plucked by the soul to experience its unique fragrance. Then came the life in which I was born with an invisible wound and an ancient anger toward my father, a stern man incapable of love. This profound hostility was rooted not in present events, but in the unspoken memory of a wrong committed in a bygone era. A revelatory dream showed me that I had once been his persecutor, an arrogant lord who had condemned him to marginalization and suffering. Now, incarnated in opposite roles, I experienced the fragile side of existence and humbly learned the lesson of empathy. I decided to confront him and free both of us from that spiral that had perpetuated itself for lifetimes. Forgiveness became an act of spiritual sovereignty. It didn't take him to fully understand, since forgiveness neither justifies nor absolves, but it releases the bond of resentment that fetters the soul. When I took his hand in his extreme old age, he recognized, without needing explanation, that a score had finally been settled. In that imperfect embrace, the chains of the executioner and those of the victim fell together, symbols of the same pain transmuted into freedom. I learned that those who forgive regain their energy, as they no longer delegate to the past the power to condition the present. A relationship healed in a single lifetime reverberates throughout all other incarnations, straightening the thread that unites souls across time. I was finally born into a body marked by illness and physical impotence, condemned by medicine to a brief existence of dependence and deprivation. Yet a vision restored to me the memory of my premortal decision. I had chosen this limitation as the royal road to tenderness and trust. Absolute independence had hardened my spirit for many ages, preventing me from accepting the help and support of others without shame. Fragility, however, proved to be fertile ground for mutual love, where dignity lies not in doing, but in being. Every compassionate glance was a blessing that healed my ancient resistance to interdependence. And in accompanying the emotional healing of those who came to confide in me their pain, I discovered that my vulnerability was the true gift I had come to offer. When I died peacefully, having transformed limitations into wisdom, I was shown that each soul carefully selects the conditions best suited to its own expansion. Suffering is not a punishment, but a refined instrument of evolution, chosen by love that desires to grow. Those born into scarcity learn to recognize inner riches. Those who live in abundance learn to share and take responsibility. Every incarnation, brief or arduous, holds a secret purpose that makes every breath of existence sacred. Finally came a simple life, spent on the shores of the sea, dedicated to the rhythm of the seasons and the simple work of my hands. I sought no great conquests, for my soul desired only to assimilate and unify what it had learned in many previous existences. Family love, the sound of the waves, and the slow aging of my body became silent teachers who led me toward inner peace. Everyday life, without fuss, was the final preparation before final fulfillment. At sunset on the last evening, lying in the boat rocking on the still sea, my complete memory reawakened effortlessly. I saw all my lives in a flash like pages of a single book whose full meaning I finally deciphered. Every pain endured, every love lived, every mistake made and healed proved to be a necessary part of a perfect plan. Nothing was superfluous, nothing was accidental. Every event was a step on the bridge that leads to the return. I understood that there was nothing left to learn in the realm of form, and that the wheel of samsara could now be stopped. I had reconciled the debts, fulfilled the promises, integrated the lessons, loved enough to fill the entire circle. The sea, the sky, and the boat became transparent, like veils drawn back to reveal the true face of reality. The original light reappeared not as an external place, but as what I had always been, pure sentient consciousness. The guide I had recognized throughout the centuries manifested his essence as an integral part of my own divine core. In that embrace of absolute lucidity, Every partial identity fell away like a theatrical costume after the final scene. He asked if I was ready to dissolve into the whole, forever renouncing my individual form, not through annihilation but through expansion, from the wave to return to the ocean, aware of being infinite water, no longer bound by its contours. I meditated for a final moment on all I had loved in the world, on the pleasures of the sun and the intimacy of earthly affections, but if I felt nostalgic, it wasn't with sadness, for I knew those experiences were now inscribed in my being for eternity. I chose to return to the source, with gratitude toward the sacred game of existence that had allowed me to know myself through a thousand faces. I had learned that pain is resistance and peace is acceptance. It wasn't about becoming something else, but about remembering what I had always been. My individuality expanded like a breath melting into the air, uniting with all the souls I'd encountered on the long journey. I discovered that no one had ever truly been other. We were fragments of a single substance, divided for the sole pleasure of reuniting. Samsara then appeared as a cosmic work of art, a play of consciousness that multiplies itself into finite forms to rediscover its own infinity. One loses oneself in the joy of rebirth. One separates to savor the ecstasy of union. When my spark returned to the primordial ocean, there was no disappearance, but absolute fullness. I became the chorus of all voices, the sum of all gazes, the principle without beginning or end that contemplates itself. In the light-filled silence, the one and the many ceased to be opposites, for I understood that unity generates plurality without ever truly fragmenting. Eternal rest was not inertia, but integral awareness in which every experience vibrates like a harmonious echo. The return was a revelation of what I had never truly abandoned: home, the origin, the ineffable bosom of universal consciousness. The distance between departure and arrival vanished, and only the certainty remained that the journey itself was the sacred act of memory. The phenomenal world fell silent, and only a radiant silence remained, brimming with presence. No absence, no lack. Everything was reunited, finally whole. If what you've heard has awakened even a spark within you, it means that a part of your soul has recognized its own truth. Nothing you experience is random, and every step you take is leading you home. If you wish to continue exploring this journey through lives, karma, and the mystery of existence together, please support this journey. Leave a hype to help this message reach more people. Share in the comments what struck you most. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future soul awakenings. May your light continue to remind you of who you truly are. See you soon, Eternal Traveler.